Vittoria Federici is a manager in the content policy team at Facebook, which is responsible for writing and interpreting global policies governing what users can share on Facebook. As part of this role, she is responsible for building relationships with NGOs, academics, and other thought leaders across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa in order to provide transparency on Facebook's content policies and to incorporate external feedback into Facebook's policies development process. This work puts her at the center of many current internet policy issues, including the scope of freedom of expression, fighting hate speech, countering violent extremism, and user trust. Today, she will speak about Facebook's approach to fighting online hate speech. And with this, I will let Vittoria start her presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kristina. I'm really, really happy to be here. Can everyone see my screen and the presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. So as Kristina said, I'm Vittoria Federici and I'm a manager on the content policy team at Facebook. Today, I will talk about Facebook's approach to fighting online hate speech. In doing so, I will talk you through our content policies, our policy development process, as well as the people and the technology that make up the enforcement of such policies. So at Facebook scale, content review requires a very important partnership of different teams and subject matter experts across policy, product, and operations. And these teams work together every day to address enforcement with the thought and skill a project of this complexity and scale requires. So let's begin with my team, the content policy team, which is the team that develops and refines our content policies, so called our community standards. And we work with internal teams as well as thousands of outside experts, academics and NGOs and policymakers to get feedback on our community standards and to make improvements to these policies. Then we have community integrity, which is the team that builds the products to keep people safe and secure on the platform. And they do this in two ways. They build the user experience that enables people to report harmful content, to send us feedback, to appeal decisions, as well as developing the artificial intelligence algorithms that detect and surface harmful content, and that either takes it down automatically or escalates it for review. And this team includes engineering, data science, product, program management, as well as data engineering. And finally, we have global operations, and this is the team that enforces our community standards through human review. And I will speak more about our human reviewers later on in this presentation. But it's really, really important to understand that all of these teams have to work in concert together. One team can't really support the Facebook community without the help of the others. And in the last few years, we have tripled the number of people working on safety and security. And now we have over 35,000 people working in this space. So our content moderation process is built around a set of policies that we call the community standards. And these policies govern what content is and is not allowed on the platform. Anything that our users share on Facebook is subject to Facebook's community standards, which cover a very wide range of issues, from credible threats to bullying and harassment, from hate speech to graphic violence, as well as terrorism, and so on and so forth. We cover a very wide range of areas. It's key to understand that we have one global set of policies that are applied equally to all types of content across different regions and across different countries. We want to promote borderless sharing, and this is not going to be possible if we start pegging our policies to individual country laws. Having said that, it can be pretty challenging to create a set of policies to serve a community which is as large and diverse as ours. Oftentimes, what is acceptable in one part of the world may not be acceptable in another. And so this means that we are constantly balancing and reweighing and iterating our policies to make sure that they fall in the right place and that they strike the right balance between safety and expression. So as I said before, the content policy team is always working to iterate and improve our community standards to make sure that they are fit for purpose and in keeping up with evolving social and linguistic norms. And here is a simplified diagram of how this process works and how we acquire insight into the policy process from both internal as well as external experts. So roughly every 2 weeks, we host an internal meeting, which is called the Policy Forum, in which we bring experts from across the company to talk about potential policy changes. And this meeting is attended by a very large number of people. So in that meeting, a member of the content policy team will introduce a content issue that they would like to address. Now, there's many reasons why we may decide to draft a new policy or revise an existing one. This can be based on feedback from an external stakeholder. It can be a change that we witnessed in the way people are behaving on our platforms, or an issue that is flagged by our content reviewers related to how an existing rule is being enforced. Once the issue is raised in that meeting, we'll then convene working groups with internal teams across the company, as well as external experts in the issue, to explore what a policy change might look like. Depending on the issue, these working groups may last a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or even a year. It really depends. Based on the input that we receive and the research completed, the content policy team will then put together a policy recommendation, which will include several policy options. And these will be discussed at the policy forum. At the end of the discussion, the policy forum can then elect to approve the recommendation and so change our policies or request refinements, in which case the process repeats itself from the beginning. But I want to stress one thing. Policy development at Facebook is never really complete. The way people use Facebook changes constantly, as do social norms. And so our policy development endeavors to keep pace with that change. So as I mentioned before, policy development at Facebook is a very deliberative and collaborative process, which involves work with a wide range of internal groups in many different countries and time zones, but also a large number of external organizations and experts who help us ensure that our policies land in the right place. And this includes academics, local NGOs, safety organizations, law enforcement, human rights activists, and many, many others. I really want to emphasize that we never develop policies in a vacuum. We always reach out to experts in different fields to receive their input and feedback and to ensure that we're making informed decisions about difficult policy issues. So let's talk about our hate speech policy. So we do not allow hate speech on Facebook because it creates an environment of intimidation and exclusion, and in some cases, it may promote real-world harm and violence. We define hate speech as attacks on an individual or a group based on a number of different protected characteristics. And these include things like race and ethnicity, immigration status, national origin, religious affiliation, serious disease or disability, sexual orientation, sex, gender or gender identity, and caste. What do we mean by an attack? We mean any violent speech or support for death or harm, dehumanizing speech, statements of inferiority, contempt, or disgust, and finally, calls for exclusion. But as you know, hate speech can be highly, highly contextual, which obviously presents many challenges in enforcing our policies at scale. When the intent is clear, we may allow people to share someone else's hate speech content to raise awareness or to discuss whether that hate speech is appropriate to use. We will also allow people to use slurs in a self-referential way or in an effort to reclaim the term or for other similar reasons, but the intent has to be very clear in the post. So our policies are only as good as our enforcement, and we use a combination of user reports from our community, review by our teams, and technology to identify and review content against our standards. So let's talk about user reports. Anyone can report something to us if they think it breaks our rules, using the reporting tools that we have across Facebook. We always encourage people to report content to us because when someone shares something that goes against the community standards, we obviously want to hear about it. Of course, not everything that people find offensive or upsetting will necessarily violate our policies. And so we also offer ways for people to customize and control what they see on the platform by unfollowing, blocking, or hiding posts, people, pages, and other such things. So in addition to user reports, we're also increasingly relying on artificial intelligence to detect violating content on Facebook before people see it and report it to us. In some cases, our technology is confident enough that a piece of content violates our standards, and so it will also delete it automatically. If, for example, that piece of content is identical to something that we have removed before for breaking our rules. However, while technology has come a long way, there's still many cases in which a trained human reviewer is critical to enforcing our standards in a fair and accurate way, especially in cases where the context surrounding a piece of content is important. Let's take hate speech, for example. So hate speech is highly contextual, as I said before. Slurs can be used to attack someone, they can be used in a self-referential way, or they can be used to raise awareness of an attack. So a human reviewer is often needed to help make this kind of determination. So I just want to underline that in the case of hate speech, we're using a combination of human review and automation to remove it from the platform. In terms of human reviewers, so we have over 35,000 people working in safety and security at Facebook, of which about 15,000 are content reviewers. And these teams are based all around the world in every major time zone. And collectively, they review content 24/7 in over 50 languages. As well as local language capabilities, we also make a point to hire people with the necessary cultural context for the markets in which we operate. As we understand, it often takes a local to understand the specific meaning of a word or the political climate in which a post is shared. Our reviewers undergo extensive training when they join and throughout their time working for Facebook to ensure the decisions they make are accurate and consistent across the globe. We also do our own proactive audits where we conduct re-reviews that help us figure out if we're getting things right. But despite these steps, we know mistakes are always going to happen. And while we're constantly working to make sure that they happen less, we have an appeal system so people can actually tell us when they think we've gotten something wrong, so we can take a second look. So we believe that increased transparency tends to lead to increased accountability and responsibility. And that is why in mid-2017, we published our first community standards enforcement report, which shared numbers on the content we were seeing and catching that violated our community standards. This is a work in progress as we continue to refine our methodology, but since that first report 3 years ago, we've more than doubled the number of policies that we report on, and we've increased the frequency of reports from half yearly to quarterly. And we publish 3 sets of data in this report. So we publish how prevalent are violations on Facebook. In other words, how much of the violating content was seen by someone on the platform. That's a really, really important number because we want that to be as low as possible. Secondly, how much content do we take action on, or how many pieces of content that violated one specific policy did we take down in that quarter? And thirdly, how much violating content do we find before users reported it to us? So what percentage of the content we took down did we find proactively before anyone reported it to us? So yesterday, actually, we published our latest transparency report, which provides metrics on how we enforced our policies from January through March of 2021, so this year. And a few highlights in that report include the fact that prevalence of hate speech on Facebook is continuing to decrease. So in the first quarter of 2021, it was 5 to 6 views of hate speech per 10,000 views. Also, 97% of hate speech taken down from Facebook was spotted by our automated systems before any human flagged it to us. And this is up from 24% in late 2017. So we went from 24% in 2017 to 97% in 2021, which is a pace of improvement that we rarely see in technologies being deployed on such a scale. So in addition to having strong policies and enforcement, we also believe there is a huge value in empowering counter narratives. Oftentimes, the best remedy to bad speech is positive speech. And our community uses our platform to speak out against hatred and to raise up moderate voices in response to extremist ones. Online extremism and hate can only be tackled with a very strong partnership between policymakers, civil society, academia, and companies. And so we work closely with experts and support counter speech initiatives, including things like commissioning research on what makes counter speech effective, training NGOs about best counter speech practices, and partnering with other organizations to help amplify the voices of those on the ground. So I'm going to end my presentation here. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to taking some questions later.